Well, hello, hello. Welcome back to A Course in Miracles 365, Awakening to Love. I'm Reverend Tomas Garza, and we're arriving at the end of 10 characteristics of a teacher of God, which is question 4 from the Manual for Teachers. What are the characteristics of God's teachers? And we've looked at 9 of them so far. All of them stem from trust. Trust here in the manual has, of course, a slightly different meaning than it does in the world sometimes, right? Because trust in the world can be placed in many different things, including oneself. And as you might imagine here in A Course in Miracles, it's trust not necessarily in another person or in circumstances that may appear to be beyond our control, though that is also trust. Here in the Manual for Teachers, trust refers to trusting yourself, capital S, trusting your own true nature, trusting who you are and have always been. So the 10th and final specific characteristic that Jesus mentions here in the manual is open-mindedness, which really makes sense on the surface of it, doesn't it? Open-mindedness would be a characteristic of a teacher. And if you're looking for teachers out there in the world, if you're looking for a spiritual home or a practice and you've not found one that yet resonates with you, or you're in a transitional period, open-mindedness is big, isn't it? All of these characteristics are big. They all stem from trust of who you really are. So as you're looking at teachers and examining them to see if you want to take that further, these are all really good characteristics to take a look at. Does the teacher embody these? And do they demonstrate and show them? Open-mindedness here is really, really important. And the definition of it is total lack of judgment. That's what it is. It's a total and complete lack of judgment. Now, all of the characteristics and definitions of open-mindedness from that actually apply as well. From non-judgment comes what? An open-mindedness. It means a willingness, 100% willingness to accept everything, to bring everything into the path. And here, in the context of A Course in Miracles, to forgive everything, totally, 100%, completely. That's open-mindedness. And a reminder to all of us that one of the most powerful prayers that we could ever utter is to ask for help in setting all of your judgments aside, all of them. The result is peace. That is the result. And in fact, as we go through the couple of paragraphs of commentary here under the heading of open-mindedness, it's really, really very interesting when Jesus tells us only the open-minded could be at peace, for they alone see any reason for it. Yeah. They see the reason for it because they've set aside all judgment. If you're still judging, it makes sense that you're not totally at peace, are you? And therefore, it seems like an aspiration, or it seems like something that a reggae artist stoned out of his mind would sing about, or something that hippies like and talk about, but may or may not necessarily practice, depending on the people, right? It remains an aspiration until we go deep within ourselves and practice forgiveness and make it total, until we learn to set all of our judgments aside and become truly open-minded, truly peaceful. That's what open-mindedness is here in the context of the Manual for Teachers. So, in conclusion, this wraps up the list of 10 characteristics of God's teachers, which is question number 4. Now, before we move on to question number 5 here, which is really, really an interesting question, I'll preview that one. It's, how is healing accomplished? Yeah, well, you'll want to stay tuned for those. Very, very interesting stuff here in the manual, but that's next. Now, you'll notice that of all of the characteristics that we've spent the last few days going through, things like love, sinlessness, perfection are not mentioned. That's who we really are, is love, is perfection, is sinlessness. Yes, it's all of that. That's not a characteristic of a teacher who, by the way, is also a learner. One teaches and learns always, always simultaneously. So those aren't listed as characteristics of God's teachers because, well, they're who we all are. Now, what we're doing here, and Jesus mentions it, and most spiritual traditions think about it in this way, one way or another, is that's unlearning. We're really actually unlearning. How has an advanced teacher of God reached open-mindedness? Well, they've learned to let all of their judgments aside. They've perfected forgiveness. That is our job that is laid out before us. This is how we do it. So until we do that, we need a dynamic of teacher and student. We need a teaching and learning dynamic, and we need a handy system, a thought system like this course to help us on the way. Why? We've been trained otherwise. We've been indoctrinated otherwise. We have had a whole completely, vastly 180-degree, completely different system of values thrust upon us, shoved down our throat. If you want to look at it that way, that's not inaccurate, is it? It's pervasive here in the world to think that you're an individual, to think that you're a body. We've all been conditioned to think that. So to the extent that you still do think that, no harm in that, no problem. No problem. You're not doing anything wrong. And while we appear to be in that state, we need a dynamic of teacher and learner. We need to talk about some of these characteristics because ultimately you are going to acquire every single one of them. Whether you have none or all of them, you will acquire them all in time. Why? This is what we're destined to do. We're destined to unlearn. Learn, unlearn, same. What are we doing? We're letting all of the barriers to our awareness of love's presence go. That's what disidentifying with the ego looks like. We're setting aside all of the blockages, all of the barriers to our awareness of who we really are. That is spiritual practice. So yes, as we set them aside, we recognize them, forgive them, setting them aside, release. That is a process of unlearning So when you run across someone that possesses all of these characteristics, including open-mindedness, having set all of their judgments aside, just know that they've been at it for a long time, because this is a process for almost all of us. Even though we would love to experience final and complete awakening in a blinding flash, that is really not the way the path looks for most of us. So be kind to yourself. Because ultimately, as we see in the world, and with the practice of forgiveness here, especially as it's presented here in the Course, love is self-love. All love is self-love. It's who you are. That's who we are. Even if it looks like you're extending love to someone else, you're loving yourself. A very important thing for us all to remember is that there's no one out there, so to speak. Oneness means simply that. It's literal and it's all encompassing. And we can all be very, very happy for that fact. All right, guys, thank you so much. And we're going to be moving on here in the Manual for Teachers and talking about how healing is accomplished. So that'll be next up. Until then, thank you so much for joining me.